Hey, everybody. Mark and I have over 20 years of experience as therapists and as addicts in long term successful recovery. We know better than anyone what works and what doesn't to break out of porn and sex addiction, heal betrayal trauma, and reclaim your relationship.
And we've poured all of our personal and professional recovery and healing experience into a first of its kind program for addicts, spouses, and couples. We call it Dare to Connect.
At least 4 times every week, we engage with you in real time, in the trenches, giving you the knowledge and the tools to take back your life and relationship.
Whatever else you've done on your journey for healing and recovery, you've never done anything like this.
Mark and I, we've made all the mistakes, so you don't have to. Don't reinvent the wheel.
We all know tomorrow never comes. Look, don't wait one more day to change. Claim your free 2-week trial today at daretoconnectnow.com.
Hey, everybody. I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSE Squared podcast. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever this finds you, everybody. This is Mark and Steve on the PBC podcast coming at you with episode 231 today. We're really excited for today's topic for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is that it meshes with what we're doing in Dare to Connect right now. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But a great submission came in a little while ago from a partner of a porn addict who had some questions, and we aren't able to answer all of them, but we did want to tackle one of them specifically because it is probably the most important one that will help lead to answers for this couple and for all of you, as you have other questions probably tied to this topic as we go through it today. So I'm going to go ahead and read this, and then we will jump right into it because there's a lot to do. And this is what she says in part. I'm the partner of a porn addict who has a 3 to 4 year history of lying about being in quote unquote recovery, even to sponsors, men's groups, and therapists. My experience has been always discovery, never disclosure, and death by 1,000 cuts over the years. So she's experienced what we call a staggered disclosure, also a forced disclosure, where she is either he's disclosing things under duress, or she is finding things out. He's not being proactive with her, according to her account. He states he is now, quote, taking his recovery seriously, unquote. That's to be seen. I'm not writing on what to do about him, which is great. I'm glad that she kind of delineates that. I'm writing to understand and get closure for myself from an addiction perspective, since it has consistently been denied for me. When in active addiction or during or in actual recovery, is it true to believe that sexually and aesthetically I will always be the quote unquote lesser thing, or effort will be required to simply desire me in a way that so many other women are desirable to him? I've watched him put tons of effort and protection around his efforts to desire other women, but when it comes to me, there's absolutely nothing there. No pursuit, no flirting, no dates, no chivalry, no sex, no lust, and no love. He acts bored, uninterested, and even bothered by my presence. He calls this being sober. I call it being more than alone, and it's led me to consider actually being alone, rather than suffering while waiting for something that is seemingly never coming. My mental health is demanding I get away from this with urgency. I've wanted my family to stay together, but not at the detriment of my own health. He's obviously more interested in other women, and my concern is that since I've already been determined as quote unquote less than to him, I will never be enough in what he truly desires, even if he does get into real and active recovery. So
Yeah,
a lot there.
Yeah, very heartfelt. You can hear the pain. You can hear, the depth of betrayal, it's just such a deep submission. And this has been going on for her for a long time.
Yep.
And she's gotten to the place where we see so many partners get to, where she's just realizing, I'm going to disappear in this process. I'm going to almost cease to exist.
Yes.
just can't keep going this way. And she's
Absolutely.
unwilling for it to do so. And I'm really hearing, so now what? She
Yes.
does go on to ask, will he ever change after all he's done and the whole history and the fact that I keep being the one that discovers things and kind of forces him into disclosure and honesty, right? He puts no effort into us, but has put lots and lots of effort into others. Do I have any hope of there ever being anything here? And
Mm.
will I wait around for something that never comes? Or what I'm hearing her say is she's gotten to the place where her gut is telling her this, I've just got to go.
Yeah.
This needs to be over. Yeah.
Well, I'm just so glad that this was written in because we one for those who've listened to this podcast for some time and for those who are in Dare to Connect in particular, our program for addict spouses and couples, we one of the things that we try to combat on our many efforts is we try to give back to the community through this podcast as we run our subscription program for subscribers on a more in-depth level is we want everybody in a relationship to be empowered in this recovery process,
Absolutely. Yes.
right? One of the biggest, what would you call it, stumbling blocks, I guess, in the recovery process for the couples that Mark and I have worked with combined between our experience over 40 plus years of therapy experience with people all over the planet is that couples, because of codependency, because of other related issues, we become overly entwined, or I guess you could say held down or held back in our own individual journeys for change, growth, and healing. Or we allow that to happen in ways that are not necessary by our partners. Right now, it's true that there are pieces to this that obviously require both people to be invested in. When you're talking about any recovery dynamic, there's always three recoveries. There's the addicts, there's the partners, and then there's the couples, right? The coupleship is admittedly an amalgam of what both people are doing on an individual level and how they're collaborating. But oftentimes the mistake is made for a variety of reasons that because he's not changing or because she's not changing, therefore I can't do anything, right? I'm stuck. I'm whatever. And we want every partner to be walking out of here today and addicts in their own respective light too, to be able to kind of pick back up little pieces or components of this that maybe they've put down in terms of where am I empowered to make change? What is in my side of the street to do, differently? Where can I play a role in this so that I don't, because we know that there are lots of spouses listening who to some degree can connect with this idea of I'm just stuck, right?
Yeah.
I'm stuck here and I need out, but I don't know how or way
Well, and
or what that looks like.
in part, there's not just the relationship dynamic and of course the betrayal of addiction and all of the terrible, horrible things that go along with all that. But you bring all the peripheral into that, children, finances,
Yeah.
right? Housing situations. There's so many aspects of this that can get you into a place, especially as a partner, where you just say, I really don't have any choices here. Look
Mm-hmm.
at all of these mitigating circumstances. And it's interesting that this came in right when it did, Steve, because we are right in the depth of all of this in Dare to Connect right now.
Yeah, this is like right in our crosshairs.
We are right there. We just had a session today with couples that was right in this space. We've spent well over a month talking about this concept of what are your authentic, legitimate, deep down wants and needs as an individual and part of a relationship. What do those wants and needs look like? And now, starting Monday, actually, by the time this podcast comes out, it comes out every Tuesday. Yesterday, I guess you would say, we started to delve deeply into boundaries. How do you not now take wants and needs that you legitimately have, that are authentic to you, that are empowering to you, and how do you match those wants and needs up with boundaries, action items, right? Because so here, and Steve, you and I have talked about this in D2C for the last month or so. What happens when we have wants and needs deep down, but we don't know how to express them, right, fully and deeply? B, we could express them, but we have a partner that won't listen or is so shut off or caught up in their own world, they won't hear us or see us. So it doesn't matter if we express our needs. but secondly, how do we get those needs and wants met? And we go
Yeah.
about ways of trying to do that. And we've talked about how, for example, we go into what's called the drama triangle, which was taught to us when we were young. Typically, adults have mentored this to us. Hey, I have these needs and wants. I don't know how to express them, or if I do, I'm not seen or heard. So I'm going to get them met in whatever way I can. And I'm going to go into the drama triangle and either become aggressive and a persecutor, or I'm going to become a rescuer, or I'm going to become a victim. But damn it, I'm going to get my needs and wants met. And so we learn to get them met in all of these dysfunctional, unhealthy ways, which are just a cry out in desperation to try to be seen and heard and have some needs and met, some wants and needs met in some way. We're
Yeah.
about to go into in Dare to Connect how to get needs and wants met in healthy ways, in productive
Absolutely.
ways, in proactive ways, in empowered ways.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's one of the most important things that we're just going to say right now up front. If you find yourself struggling with this boundaries topic or establishing what are your wants and needs, what wants and needs are healthy, etc., the Dare to Connect program for addict spouses and couples doesn't just offer 30 hours a month of live ongoing content on these topics and issues. We keep 2 to 4 weeks, a minimum of 2 weeks at any given time of past recorded content from the program on there. If you are struggling with these issues, there isn't a better time to join Dare to Connect. Give it a try. There's a 2 week free trial for that at daretoconnectnow.com that you can grab. We'd love to have you come jump in on this with us as we jump into now boundaries going forward, because we like to think that we have sort of revolutionized over at Dare to Connect the way that we talk about concepts like boundaries. Boundaries are one of those buzzwords in the therapy community. Mark and I talk about this oftentimes. It's like one of those, things that just kind of gets thrown out there, well, you need better boundaries. I mean, that's just what you right. And so
Right.
they're one of those topics that are talked about it's often discussed, rarely understood.
Yeah.
And usually when we talk about boundaries and honestly, we see this even with a lot of professionals that we sometimes work with. Sometimes boundaries are looked at from this point of view of, well, this is the way that I establish control, right? Or this is the way that I create safety is just by going to boundaries, right? I just start laying down these rules or these ideas or these whatever. And there are some elements to truth on that. But one of the biggest mistakes that are made in the boundaries process is that oftentimes it's human nature to move towards the boundary or implementation stage, when the reality is, especially when you're talking about relationships that are complex, that involve significant changes or significant decisions, like do we break up a marriage? Do we stay in a marriage? We will oftentimes try to address and set boundaries without closely enough examining, weighing, and going through our authentic selves and the wants and needs that accompany those. When boundaries are set correctly, they are the way that we quote unquote enact the policy of our wants and needs. Boundaries are the quantifiable way that wants and needs are expressed. And sometimes, in varying ways, people make the mistake of they try to use boundaries as a way to establish the wants and the needs. It's almost kind of bass backwards, which is not how they're supposed to work.
Yeah.
It's not how they're supposed to function. They should
Well,
be a
and
reflection of what we're looking for.
and after years or decades, as in the case of the partner of an addict, that partner has experienced so much betrayal, so much
Yeah.
mistreatment. So, we've done whole podcasts on what that betrayal looks like. But there's been such a long history of it that by the time a partner starts to discover that she truly has wants and needs that are legitimate, and she wants to start being empowered to have them met, the history's been so long and so painful that the initial use of boundaries can come from a place of extreme reactivity,
Yeah.
from a legitimate need for retribution, justice, a sense of justice, even a sense
Mm,
of maybe a little bit of vengeance. I want him to hurt like I've hurt, right?
yes.
I want my pain to be seen. I want to get into the driver's seat, and I want to damn well force outcomes now. And
Mhm.
so you come with this very forceful, understandably very forceful way of throwing the boundaries out there as a way to get all of these years or decades of neglect to change.
Yeah.
And the challenge with that is that's when boundaries fall apart very quickly and frankly don't end up delivering the result that was hoped for.
Yes. No, it's absolutely true. And like Mark said, the obstacles, quote unquote, right, that get in the way of this, they're real. Right? Mark just listed off some of the actual elements that come into play, but the things that actually guide that, what are some of those things? One is fear. Right? We operate frequently in spouses, both spouses and addicts, but we're obviously talking about the partners here today on today's podcast. Most definitely and most understandably operate from a place of fear, or a whole list of fears, ranging from I don't know what the hell he's thinking to I don't know if he's being honest with me or not to where are we going to be at next week, next month. If you were like my wife Brittany, what's our life going to be like tonight? Because he was happy when he went to work this morning, but God knows what that means for this evening. I have no idea what that'll translate into.
Yeah. Like I said, fear if I do express my needs and wants, it's not going to be received well.
Yeah.
He's going to go defensive. He's going to get angry. He's going to go stoic and shut down. A fear that I'll never be enough for him. I'll never measure up. He seems to
Mhm.
have gone to great efforts to choose all these other women, either through pornography or actual relationships, but he doesn't seem to be putting in any of those efforts to choose me. And
Mhm.
so I'm afraid he might never, maybe he never will, or he doesn't want to, or right. So
Yeah.
many fears surrounding this.
Well, and kind of a cousin to that might be what we call a scarcity mentality. Now that can show up a lot for partners in a lot of different ways, but oftentimes and this can kind of tie into one's own internal shame or insecurity. If I leave this relationship, am I ever going to find another one?
Mm,
Right? That's one way in which that can show up.
sure.
But other things that get in the way, again, very understandable feelings that may compromise authenticity. For example, anger, right? We already touched on shame and insecurity. Hopelessness was one that Mark brought up as we were getting ready for production today, which is very valid, right? Addicts, we talk about all the time how they struggle with hopelessness. So do partners. If you're a partner with a lengthy history in relationships where you've experienced betrayal both romantically and non-romantically, and that's been your reality, it's very difficult to envision a reality where a relationship could be absent that.
Yeah, I mean
And
this partner that wrote into us said she's been through 3 to 4 years of lying and gaslighting, and now he says he's actually taking recovery seriously. But after 4 years of just the opposite, she writes, what does she say? That's to be seen.
yes, and understandably so,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Great. That's what he's saying. I've heard this song and dance before, right?
Yeah.
And then mind reading, obviously. Now, mind reading is a whole topic all its own that we can probably cover in another podcast, but there are lots of reasons why that pops up in a relationship. Oftentimes for partners, it's a compensatory factor because they're not getting the truth from their partner in vulnerable ways. And so the brain begins to do its best to fill in the gaps, which again comes up. It's a whole list of issues all on its own. That's a time for another day. But again, another very valid obstacle. So when it comes to making these critical decisions in a relationship, processing these obstacles, being aware of them, how they're influencing you is absolutely critical. In fact, today on Dare to Connect, I gave the following example. I'll just give you one quick example of why this is so important to have a grasp on this. I have worked with partners in the past, and so has Mark, where I have had a partner tell me in a session with her addict partner, and she looks at him across the room, points her finger, right in his face, and says, "If you look at pornography one more time, we are done. We're getting divorced, and that's over." Now,
Mm-hmm.
that may be a very valid need, right? For a whole list of reasons that we don't have time to go into today, based on background, moral framework, past issues in the relationship, what's gone on in that relationship before, her past history of other relationships, right? Based on a whole history of factors, that may be an authentic statement for her, and she really may mean that. I can't do one more relapse. I can't do one more betrayal. If that happens again, I am done. However, if you look at that list that we just listed off, right? Fear, scarcity mentality, anger, shame, insecurity, hopelessness, mind reading, as well as the other things that Mark talked about, reactivity, retribution, vengeance, justice, etc. You can see how if we're not aware of those things, if those things are operating in the room and we're not aware and we're not able to compensate for those, that you can, this is just one small way in which you can see where boundaries can go completely off the rail. Because what she's doing right there is essentially establishing a boundary. And if it's authentic, then it's authentic. But if it's not authentic, one of two things is going to happen. And this came up in our session in Dare to Connect today. She can be pigeonholed into that by, okay, he relapsed again. I told him I had to leave. If I'm going to be following through, I guess I've got to divorce him, even though maybe I really don't want to do that. Or she may feel pressure to walk that back, which in turn does what? Compromises her authenticity, causes self-resentment for her, and it enables him.
Right.
Right. So it's just one small example of where this boundary piece, if we don't take the time and do the necessary work before we get to boundary setting, we just jump into that. This is where the issues in a relationship that are already existing become much, much worse.
Yeah.
Around commitment and trust and consistency and all of those things.
Yeah. So there's a very mindful, well thought out, careful process with regard to boundaries.
Yeah.
How you come up with them based on your authentic wants and needs. And especially what a lot of not just partners, but also addicts in recovery have a really hard time with is they can get finally to setting healthy boundaries, but then we get to consequences or outcomes or results
Yes.
of boundaries not being kept. How does that all work? Right. So, we're going to talk for a few minutes here in this podcast about what do you go about doing to set healthy, authentic, empowered boundaries? Now, I think, Steve, you and I have said this lots of times. So one of the things that's often missed out there in the culture with regard to boundaries is what boundaries are for. Boundaries are never to control the behavior of another.
Yep.
They're never to force another to go a certain direction or to change certain things. Boundaries are strictly for me on my side of the street, right? I set boundaries so that I can have my wants and needs met in authentic ways. That's what boundaries are for. They're for me.
Yeah.
And then,
in other words, another way to say that would be is boundaries are not an edict; they're an invitation.
Not an edict; they're an invitation. That's a good way to say that.
They're not a do this or die. Although God knows addicts sometimes interpret it that way. Yours truly, I'm raising my hand right now because that's how I interpreted it at the time. It's not, if boundaries are set in the right way, they are not you have to change, because nobody can make me change, right? Or any other person change. What they are is they say, look, if you want to continue to ride the Brittany train in this marriage, right? If you want to continue on this journey with Brittany, that's my wife's name, these are the needs that I have. If you're not able or willing to respect those needs, that doesn't mean I'm telling you you're bad or evil. I'm not. You can see how, because one of the things we've covered the last couple of weeks, guys, in Dare to Connect is the drama triangle, and how in the past we have used all sorts of ways to what? Control or pressure our partner to get our needs and wants met. We haven't used healthy boundaries, so what do? We guilt them. We silent threaten them. We silent treatment them. We resent them. We attack them. We do all sorts of other things that are not vulnerable in an attempt to get those needs met. Whereas when we do this transparently, we simply say, literally, here are my needs. Here are why I need them.
Yeah.
It's an invitation. I hope that you will join me on this train, because I've ridden this. This is what Brittany was saying to Steve when she got healthy. I have ridden this. You and I have ridden this train together for 10 years, and I want to ride it together for another 50. But I can only do that if you're able to do these things. Here are the things I'm able to do for you. But and if you choose something else, that's okay. Again, I'm not telling you you're bad. I'm not going to try to make you be different. You need to be you, right? Boundaries at their core always say, you need to be you, but I also need to be me. And so here's what I need, and you need to decide if that's workable for you.
Well, and one of the things that came up in Dare to Connect from a number of partners, and this was really I felt this at the heart of this submission that we're addressing today. It's kind of this feeling of, how long do I hold out, keep putting up with this? How long do I hang in before, waiting for him to change or waiting for him to become the man that I always thought he was? And when is it time to call it quits? And I can tell you the approach that my wife took to that years ago. In essence, what she said was, I'm discovering what it means to have a voice. I'm discovering what it means to finally to be authentic and to pursue what is happiness and peace and fulfillment for me. I'm now that train that I'm discovering, this proactive, healthy, looking at my side of the street train, is leaving the station and it's pulling away. I want you to be on that train with me. And I want you to know that I haven't told the engineer to floor it so that that train speeds away from you right at 200 miles an hour. I'm actually asking him to keep the speed kind of slow because I'm
But he
progressing.
is still leaving the station
It's still leaving the station, but I want
next
you to know,
month at
yeah,
6 o'clock.
but not so fast that you can't, jog and jump on.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how long I will be able or willing to have that be the case because this healthy train is picking up momentum for me. I'm discovering who I am. I'm going forward with my life and I want you to be a part of it. But at some point, that train's going to have so much momentum and so much speed, you won't be able to jump on. And we won't be on the same train.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's a hard thing to face in relationships because that does bring, quote, scary stuff.
It does. But it's also the only way for a relationship to really continue on in a healthy way, right? This is applicable to recovery, but this is just how healthy functioning, optimally functioning relationships work, right?
Yeah.
Is when we maintain this transparency, this authenticity, and we're mindful enough about our own needs and then expressive enough about them with our partner so that we're operating in tandem. And now this has been kind of a long podcast and we've got to wrap up because then the next question becomes, well, how do I implement these?
Well,
Right?
you had some we listed out some questions for, in this case, because a partner wrote in for partners to ask, questions like, well, what really is best for me?
Mm-hmm.
I like when you said, Steve, what is my next right thing? Or we could change that to what is my next authentic thing?
Mm-hmm.
What's my next empowered thing to do? What can I realistically tolerate? And for how long? What can I realistically expect?
And when?
And yeah, expect and when. What are my baseline requirements and expectations for me to even agree to continue on from this point right now? Those are all things that need to be faced and looked at as a part of this boundaries process, and kind of in answer to what this partner sent into us.
Yeah.
But those aren't typically things that we do. So what do? We default back to what was shown us as we were growing up. Well, my needs and wants aren't being met. They're not being heard. I'm not being seen. He's not taking this serious. So I'm going to jump into these old dysfunctional ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Aggression, anger, shutting down, threatening, rescuing, trying to sex him up so that he'll finally love me and want me, right? All of these dysfunctional ways that are not healthy boundaries with really well thought out outcomes and results.
Yeah.
And we're launching in this very week that you're hearing this podcast into all of the hard work of what those boundaries and outcomes look like.
How do we implement them? How do we set up consequences? How do
Yeah.
we set expectations? How do we do all those
What does
things?
that look like?
So if you've been on the fence about joining Dare to Connect, guys, there won't be a better time. Please come and join us. DareToConnectNow.com. Again, there's a 2-week free trial that you can grab with that. Come see what the buzz is about. If you don't like it for a couple of weeks, please don't stay.
Yeah,
I don't
launch
know how
in.
often you hear that from anybody, but we would not, if you don't like the program, we would not want you to stay.
Oh.
That's why we let you come try it for a couple of weeks.
But I,
But
I I actually loved it last week. There was some partners who said, "Yeah, listen to your podcast on Tuesday, went in and joined, and it's Wednesday. I'm here, brand new."
yeah,
They started
you,
asking questions and they started getting support from the other gals that were in the live session. It was pretty cool to see them just jump in and get going.
for sure. This podcast will be coming out the first Tuesday of June of 2024. So it carries value for you whenever you listen to this recorded. But if you tune into this and it happens to be right now and you're looking for help on this issue, come join us. We're
Yeah.
tackling it right now.
Or even if
So,
you hear it a week or two or three later than what we're saying, we're going to be in this boundaries discussion for multiple weeks.
and as always, guys, in the Dare to Connect program, you can join us at any time, whenever you
Anytime.
subscribe, and we're always answering. We don't just cover monthly topics. We also address questions you submit to us. Unlike with the podcast, which usually is a 2 to 3 month time frame turnaround for because we just have a backlog of questions from all of you, which we appreciate. But the podcast is just not a form where we can do that. You can wait for 2 to 3 months to get your question answered, or you could have it answered Wednesday morning.
Yeah. Come in and have answered right away.
Absolutely. Come join us, guys. DareToConnectNow.com. Again, DareToConnectNow.com, 2-week free trial you can grab there for that. Well, we love and appreciate all of you. We so appreciate, we frequently get really kind messages from all of you, and love running a podcast for you that is not monetized, that we don't, we get told all the time, and you'd be shocked how many emails at least I get all the time saying, because I think the podcast is registered under my name, you could be monetizing this and making this much. That's not what we do the podcast for. We do the podcast to try to help each of you, to connect with each of you, to try to give back something to the community, to help you to find what you're needing, and also as an invitation to come join us and take your recovery to the next level and dare to connect. We love working with clients individually, but one client per 1 hour is just not enough for Mark and I. We like to connect with the hundreds of people we are able to connect with in a session at a time when we do that. So we hope that you'll come over and join us. As always, you are always welcome to send in questions for us to the podcast at pbsepodcast.com. There is a contact form at the bottom that you can submit those in. You also can hunt through and search. Mark has done an amazing job of categorizing in the blog, under the blog tab at pbsepodcast.com. You can do a search there for other podcasts that we have on a variety of topics. We're now 231 episodes in, and we have all of those housed within the website, so you can pull those up anytime as well. And we hope to hear from you and see you in the program soon.
All right, everybody. Hey, take care, and we will pick things back up in our next episode.
Sounds great. Bye-bye, guys. Everything expressed on the PBSE podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants, and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.